teachers of Reddit. What's the weirdest thing a student has accidentally sent instead of / with his / her homework / assignment? I once received a submission from a student that had another student's name on it from the year before. They didn't even bother to update that during their plagiarism. In college, I left a paper I had finished writing open on my laptop and went out for the night. Next morning before class, I printed the paper and handed it in. Got it back a couple weeks later covered in red pen with stuff like "frick my titties, butts and penis" circled throughout the paper, and my prof had written "roommates got to this." At the top of the first page had a student plug in their USB drive to pull up a presentation. The guy opened the wrong folder and dozens of pronoun video icons were suddenly projected on the screen for the whole class to see. Now I cover the LCD until I can see what is going to be projected. Oh, another one. I had a student turn in a paper that was almost 100% plagiarized. It was just an obvious CTRL plus C CTRL plus V job. I confronted her about it and she claimed she had no idea it was plagiarized. I said, "Really? You didn't know it was plagiarized?" She said, "Well, I mean, it's not like I plagiarized it myself." She had had a friend write her paper and her friend screwed her over. I once had a student send me a screenshot of lazy town pronoun with a caption that just said "love you." Edit. She didn't accidentally send it instead of an assignment. She accidentally sent it to me instead of a friend. Our emails apparently started with the same combination of letters. Edit 2. Spelling. I submitted a resume one time with the file name "piece of shoot resume." Forgot to change it after being frustrated with formatting for a few hours. Needless to say, I didn't get an interview. A friend in college changed every instance of the word "man" into "Batman" in one of my papers. I noticed and did a find and replace for every instance of Batman. I didn't anticipate there being Batman as well. Not a teacher, but I once sent in my Spanish HW to my history class by accident. I got it back saying "muy mal, Bob."
N.
A friend of mine accidentally put his electric bill in the middle of a long political science paper in college. The professor simply wrote "I hope you paid this on time" with a couple question marks on it. The teacher I was the tar for once told me that instead of a social essay, a person sent in their XXX rated fanfiction. My college roommate wrote poetry. Her assignment started with a B, but she sent her poem titled "Backseat Love" to her professor on accident. Very erotic poem. Noticed immediately and frantically ran to his office and supposedly caught him before he opened it. Made him delete it. She was a mess for a week after that though. In college, someone caught onto the fact that one of the professors never read our weekly essays and instead randomly assigned a grade. One of my friends submitted the same essay every week, just under a different title. He got varying A's and B's on all of them. One time, my college professor kept me after lecture because he thought I was getting bullied. I was instantly confused and chucked and asked him why. He showed me the assignment that I handed in, and the heading read "My name has a tiny Aztec, my friends are assholes." Edit. Grammar. Nap. One of my roomies did worse. He waited until I was asleep, and at the time none of us locked our freaking computers because, hey, we're all friends here. Fast forward to like 2 weeks later, when I get the essay back, and right in the middle of the intro paragraph is like 2 or 3 sentences circled in red with surrounded by several giant question marks. The text reads something along the lines of, "Iramal procrastinated doing his paper and chose to instead furiously masturbate in a full-body latex catsuit while watching Too Loud Furry Pronoun. He then fell asleep, woke up, panic wrote the last 2/3 of this paper and didn't proofread. Yours truly, troll. Still gotta be. Bye." I sent in a hastily written late maybe essay for my jazz history class with a picture of my cat attached. He now apparently uses it as an example of a good essay, cat picture and all. Not by accident, but I got a good laugh when a particularly challenging student thanked me for the course and included a picture of a cake that said "Thanks for tolerating me." One time I printed off an essay in a hurry and grabbed all the paper that was on the tray. I was still living at home at the time. Got my essay back a couple weeks later and flipped through it and realized it included multiple pages of grocery store coupons/flyers that my dad had printed. Professor made no comment on it, but I felt so silly. My roommate emailed our prof an assignment that was extremely confusing and a waste of time. She had named the file dumb and forgot to change it. Prof emailed back like interesting file name and still gave her a fair grade for it. We thought it was hilarious. I had a friend in uni who did something similar. She named the file \\lecturer's name \s dumb assignment, and at one point we had to open up our files in front of that lecturer. My friend was really nervous, but the lecturer just smiled and said, "Don't worry, I was a student once too." The weirdest thing to me is when students copy and paste their entire paper in the email instead of sending an attached file. Seriously? In 2018, I once sent out a picture of myself instead of my presentation. Oh god. In one of my classes, our group used WhatsApp to communicate, and I had never used it before. As we're all connecting, or whatever, I notice everybody has their personal pics as their avatars. Cut to me trying to choose my best picture to use, all the while accidentally setting each one as the group avatar. Thanks to the notifications, the entire group got to see each picture I tried next. I had just split from my then wife about a month before it happened, so I've never gotten to tell that story to anyone. BC I had no friends at the time. You should all feel very special. I was texting my friend about the weird fact that I sneeze constantly when aroused. I hit the wrong chat box and actually texted it to my online physics teacher. To this day, I'm mortified. Do I have something for this? I'm not a teacher, but at my old job I was helping my manager sort through applications. All the applications had a resume and a cover letter as a separate attachment. We opened up this one guy's cover letter to read it, and there was just this enormous slab of text. I don't have a copy unfortunately, but it was just 800 to 900 words talking about how darkness was at the core of every human soul or some shoot. It was also pretty terrible. It kept repeating itself, and was full of spelling and grammar errors, and was probably the cringiest thing I'd ever read. It reminded me of some edgy 13-year-old's poetry. We obviously did not hire him. Not a teacher, but the idiot who did it. I once got thanked for the recipe. I printed out my paper in college and didn't realize my mother's recipe was stapled to the back. Got an A and a thanks for the recipe. It was delicious. Edit. She left it in the printer and I just picked everything up and stapled it and handed it in. A student had her water break on her assignment. Turned it in. Did not touch it, gave 100% credit. We had an applicant go into labor during the admissions exam. She came out of the test room and said, "I don't think I'm going to be able to finish," and I discreetly asked her if she needed help with reading the directions/questions, a very common occurrence, and she laughed and told me she was having contractions. Needless to say, we let her take the test again with no penalty a few months later. I'm a student, but I once sent my friend an email with a pic of a few dolls attached, with a question like, "What weird shoot should I do to these?" I'm thinking of hanging them from my ceiling on tiny nooses. Looked at it again a few minutes after sending, and realized it hit the wrong email in autofill, and sent it to a teacher with the same first initial. I apologized quickly. He didn't respond. One of my master teachers has the same first 3 letters for her first name as my boyfriend. I pay extra attention when I email him, just so I don't email her something with a dirty subject line. How we get each other's attention to edit our assignments. My roommate had a math professor who didn't actually check if the homework was correct, so after his first few assignments, where he got full credit even with obvious mistakes, he would only do 1 page of the assignment and staple an old assignment to it. He got full credit on all of his homeworks. Didn't do great on his exams though. I teach Latin, and I once received an email from a student stating she did not feel comfortable doing her Latin homework because it might summon demons. She did eventually leave the class. I wish I were joking. Kind of related. My senior year of high school we had one assignment where we had to write a letter to our future selves, and our teacher would wait 5 years and send them out. I got my letter this year and got all excited to read what I had wrote. Imagine my surprise when I opened it and there were 2 pieces of scratch paper. I had totally forgotten until that moment that as a perennial slacker in high school I hadn't actually done the assignment and just turned in a sealed envelope with 2 random papers. The only thing I wrote on the paper was I hope you don't procrastinate anymore and the year with my name. I played myself. I once pulled an all-nighter to finish a paper during exams week. My brain was so fried. My roommate had been helping me edit it, so I was giving different versions different titles. The version I ending up submitting was entitled, "It's not a ver until the fatwa keysings." Docs. Roommate noticed it right after I sent it. I about died then slept for 4 hours. Professor never said a word. I can only hope they too were so burnt out they didn't care. When I was 5, the teacher asked us to write something about our weekend. My mother had had a miscarriage that weekend. Since I had heard panicked shouting from their bedroom, I had toddled in there to see what the fuss was about. I saw a grisly scene involving blood-soaked sheets and unhappy faces. My parents spun me a bizarre lie about my mom not feeling well that attempted to explain what I was looking at. For the assignment I wrote down my naive version of events, filling in the details with my confident knowledge of human reproduction and adult language. My poor teacher was so shocked, she called my parents in immediately to confront them. It was probably the most fricked up story of all time. Imagine skimming through 20 vignettes about lemonade stands and tree houses, and then finding this scene from The Exorcist, written from the perspective of an oblivious child. Once I sent some gay supernatural fanfiction I'd been writing instead of my English final paper. It was awkward. It was 11th grade. All I can do is cringe. Went to submit the file for my senior paper before graduating high school, and it was 3 AM, and I had a terribly slow computer. I was filling out the submission process and hit add file, and it had the option to check multiple files. As I was tired and frustrated I hit the file with my paper over and over, and as it was uploading my computer sorta froze for a bit. I kept trying to scroll up and down while furiously clicking because I wanted to sleep, and then it said it sent. So I went to bed, only to discover when rechecking in the morning that I had also sent pictures of weird cats, like the one with a cat in tinfoil with butter on it, or the cat being eaten by that weird blow-up fish, etc. Turns out my literature teacher was a 70-year-old man who enjoyed memes, and he actually noted on the paper, when he printed and returned them, was a shoot paper, but you're graduating so here's a 90. Thanks for the laugh. I've never been so relieved and offended at the same time. Once I had a presentation in class and had my PowerPoint on a thumb drive. I plug in the thumb drive, and while the projector is displaying everything on the screen, I click around looking for Twisted Fishnook's thumb drive on the computer. When I scroll to something that just says I like butts, I remembered my GF messing with my computer earlier in the week and opened that, and then my presentation as quickly as possible. I think my professor noticed, because I saw her smirking, or maybe I imagined it. I once submitted a PowerPoint that I forgot to put my name on. Luckily the process looked at the original computer's name, which was over and under is a badass. Edit, a letter. I'm a student, but in my creative writing class in high school, I accidentally submitted my rewrite of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice instead of a deep poem. Luckily, I realized my mistake as soon as I submitted my poem right after with an apologetic comment. Guy I went to college with sent his fake ID information in a PDF instead of a presentation. Professor made him pull it up in front of the class. It was hilarious. I taught a sociology course a few years ago and had a student submit an assignment with "Frick you, you sexist beach" as a response to a question. When I asked her about it later, she told me that she often writes in her initial responses or thoughts about questions, and she must have forgotten to delete/change this one. I was the graduate student teaching assistant, and I was assisting my advisor in an undergraduate statistics lab. I was helping a student when my advisor walked up to me flustered and red in the face. He pointed at a woman sitting across the lab and said Netflix //and //backrubs. Could you please go help that student find her syntax file, and for God's sake teach her to put her files into folders. I walked over and looked at the student's flash drive where she had saved her syntax file. It was full of nude photos of her. Like, all the thumbnails were clearly visible. I helped her search for the correct file extension and then we had a chat about folders. A little late, but there is no way anyone has this beat. I'm a Spanish teacher. I used to have this select your project assignment where I had like 50 mini projects that each had individual point values possible. They had to do 10 points worth of projects to get full credit. One of the 1-point projects was to find a Hispanic recipe in Spanish and translate the recipe to English. To make it a 5-point project, you could cook it and bring it to class. So this kid turns in what I can only summarize as the stupidest thing I've ever seen in 11 years teaching. Literally nothing was correct. First off, he didn't find a recipe in Spanish, it was in English. Second, the recipe wasn't Hispanic, it contained Spanish rice and was some goofy non-ethnic cuisine. Lastly, and most egregiously, he knew he was supposed to translate it, and he wasn't sure what to do, since it was already in English, so his genius solution was to go to Google Translate and translate it into Chinese. I was sitting there staring at these Chinese characters, and looking at him, and then back to the paper, then back to him again. I asked him what he could have possibly been thinking, and he started crying, saying that it was too confusing. Oh, and he also didn't turn in any other of the projects, so he would have only gotten 1 point out of the 10 anyway. I had to upload scans of a comic I had drawn for a final project. I uploaded 3 pages worth and a video of a crow saying frick you I had on my desktop instead of the 4th page. Not one of my finer days. The parents' ovulation schedule. I accidentally submitted the lyrics to Tears for Fears Everybody Wants to Rule the World instead of my physics homework. I had just written them because I was bored and had time to kill. When the professor handed the homework back, he wrote on my paper, "Are you okay? Do we need to talk?" Which was nice and all, but I damn near died of embarrassment. It still bothered me intensely for like 8 years afterward. This reminds me the time I was trying to pitch a job through FB, and instead of sending my brochure I sent a doc with my Netflix mail and password. I have to say that the email I use for Netflix is cringy. Some edgy teen shoot like Lone Dangerous Wild Wolf and the password was the name of a girl. I had a take-home midterm for Spanish class. It was a huge packet that was all handwritten the night before its due. I was reviewing it in the kitchen where my mom had been cooking dinner. I stupidly tossed it down on the stove after reviewing, not realizing the burner was hot. It burned a coil pattern halfway through the packet. I turned in the charred packet anyway and my teacher just laughed and showed the whole class. I was embarrassed, but still got a B. This wasn't to a teacher, but I almost accidentally sent this gifs//I imga.com/nzwaku4q gif instead of my resume as I was applying for a job. I was straight out of college and didn't really know what I was doing, so I had my resume saved in this random folder that I used as a catch-all for things. The gif was right next to my resume alphabetically, and I misclicked on it when attaching. Good thing I realized what I had done right after I hit send, and mail has the option to unsend if you are fast enough. One time my friends added pronoun to the end of an essay I wrote without me knowing it, a few pages down. I didn't realize it, and I turned it in online. The teacher called my parents about it. I told them I didn't know and no one believed me. My friends were shoot.